Hello watch enthusiasts! 50 years and a few days ago, the Omega Speedmaster Professional was immortalised as the first watch on the moon on the wrists of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Despite the waning support for the moon landings which was expressed by the American public during the period, it is undeniable that the advertising campaigns adopted by Omega in the latter half of the 20th century succeeded in fuelling ardent support for this fabled watch. But today I'm not going to tell the story of how the Speedmaster found its way onto the wrists of the astronauts, a story which in any case I've already told on the channel, but rather I'd like to address the legacy which this watch has left. And this is a legacy which at once affects Omega and the entire watch industry today. But before I begin the video, I would of course like to encourage you to like, share and subscribe if you enjoy the video or find its content interesting. The first aspect of the Speedmaster's legacy which I'd like to address is a product of the pragmatism of NASA in the 1950s and 1960s. When the Speedmaster was selected by NASA, it was not designed for the task of spaceflight, hence the very traditional case without crown guards or much protection for the crystal and pushers. It won the commission for sheer quality, as it was subjected to the brutal tests put forward by NASA. Importantly, this was something which contemporary chronographs from the likes of Rolex simply could not. However, by 1969, 4 years after the creation of the Speedmaster Professional's iconic wider 42mm case with twisted lugs and the updated dial, Omega had ideas to change it into something which would have been more sensible in as trying an environment as space. And so the Speedmaster Mark II was born with its tonneau-style case and hooded lugs, thus spawning the Mark series in the 1970s and 80s, watches which gave the Speedmaster automatic winding, the date, and no end of experimental case shapes. However, with the possible exception of rumoured 1980s cosmonaut flights, these were not watches which made it into space, let alone to the moon. The reason behind this was NASA's reluctance to take new technology which, having seen the condition of the Apollo program watches with cracked crystals and missing bezels, may have actually been beneficial to surviving the rigours of spaceflight, especially with no end to the metal surfaces to bump a watch on. As a result, the Speedmaster has remained largely unchanged down to its tachymeter bezel, a quirk of 1950s sports chronographs which still few use as more than a novelty. Of course, Speedmasters like the X33 have offered a new interpretation to the astronaut's watch, with quartz movements and functions going far beyond a simple chronograph. Yet Omega still have never again brought into question the design or manual winding nature of the basic Speedmaster Professional. Another product of the moon landing for the Speedmaster and other watches alike is the development of the culture of nostalgia currently present in the watch industry. Unsurprisingly, the thoroughly old-school Speedmaster fits perfectly into the trend for the celebration of vintage watches, with its Hess-like plastic crystal, manual movement and functional design. Yet, ironically, it can also be viewed as a catalyst for this trend, as the very movement inside it has become the stuff of legends, and has driven the search of the past for the future of mechanical watches. The movement in question is, of course, the Omega 321, a manual chronograph movement which famously outdid Rolex and other competitors when put through the gruelling tests set out by NASA in the mid-1960s. Remarkably, it's not radically different to today's Speedmaster caliber 1861, despite an increase in beat rate and a change to the chronograph assembly. However, what's most interesting about this movement, aside from its origins in the 1940s Le Mania 2510, is the way in which it's changed the tastes of watch enthusiasts. The legendary status afforded this movement due to its use on the moon has popularised the use of a column wheel, a crenellated wheel controlling the engagement, disengagement and resetting of the chronograph. 20 years ago, the relevance of a part which minutely increased the crispness of chronograph operation would have been pretty minor, yet today we see buyers actively dismissing chronographs without this mechanism. The extent of this phenomenon is such that, as we saw earlier this year, Omega is actually recreating these movements for a limited time. Of course, rather ironically, it's far more likely that it was the sheer quality of Omega movements in the 1950s and 1960s which put them on such a pedestal by comparison to the Visual or Venus movements, amongst others, of Rolex. This theory is supported by watchmakers for whom movements such as the 321 or three-hand movements from the period, such as the 552 as was used on the Seamaster, represent a real high point of quality and engineering, something arguably lost in the 1970s and 80s for Omega. However, irrespective of why this movement was so special, it was the moon landings which put it on the map, and rather near the centre of it too, for these watch collectors and indeed for watch lovers alike. Indirectly, therefore, The moon landings also created our current appreciation for certain qualities in movements such as the aforementioned column wheel, thus reshaping the industry, and then when we look at a new release from a watch brand. In truth, however, the real irony is that if it cost as much as it likely will to buy a Speedmaster after the range has been fitted with Omega's new column wheel chronograph, as is seen in the 50th anniversary 321 remake which we've seen in recent days, or more likely the coaxial version of their well-known and well-respected movement which was seen earlier in the year in the Gold Anniversary edition, it likely wouldn't have made it to the moon in the first place. Of course, this is down to the expense of these models by comparison to their equivalents in the day, and this is due to the transition from tool to tool watch and finally to a luxury item, a change which the publicity of the moon landings directly contributed to, and really has changed the modern watch into something very different to what it was in the 1960s, when you consider the fact that its perception to the market is completely different, despite the form factor and the general build and application remaining very similar. But I would like to note that the development of love for column wheels and vintage watches as a cultural change for the watch industry does owe its creation to far more than just the moon landings and the Speedmaster, though it must be admitted that the effect of these still remains striking and I think worthy of note. The result of these musings is that we owe a great deal to the moon landings as the creators of the platform for Omega to continue to innovate, or at times to preserve something which few other brands would be prepared to leave alone. The legacy of these landings continues today as both NASA move towards further space exploration, and as Omega finally replaces these movements as the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 passes. I will, however, conclude this video here, but please do tell me what you thought of this more discursive style of video format, as a slight change to my usual style. Also, do give me your thoughts on the Speedmaster Professional, and whether you feel it has left such a mark through the moon landings. If you enjoyed this video, then please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and also to see more content here in future. Thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, out.